If you're seated at the table, you got one job to do, and that's eat. Let's talk about imposter syndrome and the ways to combat it, how to show up authentically, and do exactly what you're supposed to do when you have a seat at the table, and that's eat. I'm going to give you 5 codes that help navigate and combat the false reality that is imposter syndrome. These codes are based on my own experience as a brand and cultural strategist, an executive leader, and someone who has had to fight through the feelings of imposter syndrome many times in my career. I'm going to share a simple 5-step system or framework that'll allow you to remind yourself of who you are and why you're there anytime imposter syndrome tries to creep into your mind and your emotions. 5 R's are research, readiness, read, rise, and repeat. So let's dive into how we put the 5 R's to use to combat imposter syndrome in your life right now. Welcome to Make the Way, the culture podcast where we decode culture in real time. I'm your cultural guide and guard, Mike Fair, and I love that you're joining me for another episode of Make the Way. So let's start by defining imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is defined as a psychological experience of intense self-doubt. It's an experience where high achievers fear being exposed as a fraud despite having evidence of success. I think it's always important for us to break down the definition of something first so that we have an accurate representation of what we're exploring. And I think there are a couple things that are super interesting around the definition. Number one, this is psychological. I think a lot of times we're thinking about imposter syndrome as the physical experience of being out of sorts or the physical nature of being at a table that feels uncomfortable. But this is something that's happening in the mind, and we have to navigate it through our thoughts and the words and beliefs that we pour into ourselves in response to, honestly, the messages that we're receiving within our mind. The most important tool in responding to imposter syndrome are the words, the messages, the thoughts that we offer ourselves in response to it. The other piece that I think is super important for us to acknowledge is that this is relevant for high achievers despite having real evidence of success, expertise. So I think the lens on the information we're going to uncover in our 5 R's, this is in response to true imposter syndrome, where there is evidence of success, there is evidence of expertise. You have done the work, and now we're combating a psychological experience that would have you think otherwise. There's nothing wrong with being new to something, being a novice, but in this context, we're talking about being well prepared and well equipped to do something, and your thoughts are telling you otherwise. So, with that definition in place, let's dive into our 5 R's. The first R is research. I think whenever I'm navigating an experience of imposter syndrome, I have something coming up that is important, something that maybe I have some fear around, some anxiety around. I personally start by leaning into research, immersing myself in the subject, immersing myself in the realities of the people that will be in the room, their background, their work, their narrative around their career or their expertise. I think a lot can be said about responding to imposter syndrome, responding to fear and anxiety with data, responding to it with insight, and that actually being a response to this false this false idea that you don't have the information, that you aren't ready to sit at the table, that you don't have the ability to do whatever it is that you're facing. Getting immersed in the content, doing your background research, and feeling well equipped no matter what comes up in the room, that you've spent some time unpacking the subject, that you've spent some time identifying and exploring the perspective of the individuals you're going to be working with. I think that's always a great first step. And it is truly anchored in preparation, as a response to fear. I will say this is something that I'm constantly leaning into in my career as a brand and cultural strategist. A big part of my role as an executive leader and head of strategy is doing new business pitches. And that comes with a lot of fast paced deadlines, quick turn ideation, development of content. I'm actually in the middle of a new business pitch right now. And I think the way that I comb around all of it on a regular basis is immersing myself in the research so that I can develop the content that I need to develop in real time, but also educating myself on the brand, the different players at the brand who will ultimately evaluate my work and my team's work. And that typically allows me to walk into the situation feeling like, nah, I got this. Like, the reality is that I've done the work and God is going to do the rest, Like, I've prepared and now I'm ready to take my seat at the table and chop it up with the people. So that's our first R around research. Our next code is readiness. And while this is closely aligned with our research code, readiness is taking a step further from taking in information, doing your research, doing your immersion, to actually now starting to visualize and map out what do I need to be successful at said table? What do I need to feel completely equipped for said moment that I'm walking into, that I'm wanting for myself? Sometimes it is a big meeting. Sometimes it is a big presentation. Other times it's just getting ready for the next phase of your career or your life or your passion or whatever it is. And a big part of that is visualizing success, thinking about the ideas that you need to present, thinking about the questions that you might need to respond to, and mapping out your responses, mapping out your talk track, and like getting really clear on like how you will show up in said environment that maybe is causing you to have a little bit of fear or anxiety or feel like you won't fit within that environment, or maybe you don't have the right to be in that environment. No, start visualizing yourself in that seat, in that moment of interaction, and see yourself doing well. And part of that is getting prepared, doing the work of like thinking through, how will I respond to this? What am I saying? Have I rehearsed enough? Have I, done my due diligence to make sure that I'm feeling really well equipped? And it's not about over preparation either. And I want to say that I think at a certain point in my career, as a younger professional, I would rehearse for, a presentation to no end or an interview. And sometimes that can put you in a state of worry if you overdo it. And I think it's really important to get ready, but don't over prepare. I think that can become a crutch in some instances. So, but one thing that I love to do, I love thinking about what are the questions that could be asked, especially in the context of an interview or the context of a presentation. Just reminding myself of my key talking points, the things that I love to share about myself or about my career, and being ready to lean into that. If it's a particular subject matter for a discussion, spending some time, obviously, through the research phase, but then also thinking about what's my point of view if I was asked a question about this, or what's my unique take. Spending some time thinking about that. And this won't always be a ton of hours. I'm constantly switching gears throughout the day, managing strategy output on multiple clients. Sometimes it just looks like a quick refresh on the assignment, the output that's required, and what would I actually want my team to create, or what would I want to create in pursuit of great work. And that might be 15 minutes in my day where I'm thinking through those prompts and then ultimately walking into a meeting well equipped to have the chat, well equipped to give direction, and feeling really ready for the conversation, whatever it is. The third R is read. And This is not in the sense of the research and readiness that we talked about earlier. This is about reading the room. I think many times we can start to experience imposter syndrome and fear and anxiety about different tables and different assignments because we come in with this expectation of I have to deliver. I have to have something relevant to say, and I have to come in immediately and make impact, and I have to have a brilliant hot take for everyone to lean back in their seat. Like, no. You are there honestly for multiple reasons, right? If you have a seat at the table, number one, just because of uniquely who you are. But I think so many times a big part of why I'm in the room and why I'm at the table is to assess. It's to be a critical thinker, to actually listen and take in the information, the content, the ideas of others and help synthesize that, help put it to good use and make it actionable. It's not always about me having the brilliant idea, me having the brilliant strategy that's going to save everything because of my uniquely owned idea. It's sometimes really just about me listening to others and being able to connect the dots, like put the Lego pieces together in a way that really makes sense. And I think sometimes we forget that, like, we're at the table to read the room, to read the players, to assess the materials and the parts that are already there. And then how can we bring value to the elements? It's not always about coming in with a new blueprint. I think sometimes we are best and we are most useful when we are in service of the collective. I think the best leaders are looking to glean insight from others. They are looking to serve others and they're actually best at helping other people elevate their ideas. And that's not taking credit for them. It's more so, how do we take all the brilliance that's in the room? How do we take the great thinking that's in the room and put it into a form that is useful and actionable? And that means you have to read the room. Can't always have this ambition and or this pressure to be the voice, to be the loudest in the room, as they say. I think there's something to be said about coming in with the ability and the desire to listen, to assess, to identify the best thinking and help shape and mold that. And so that's what I mean by read the room. Our next R in our 5R framework is rise. And rise is all about rise to the occasion. You are at the table for a reason. You're there to sit at your seat, break out your utensils, and eat just like everybody else at the table. You're not there by chance. You aren't there to perform. You are there because you have something to offer, something to bring to the table. No one else has your lived experience. No one else has your unique expertise. And you are doing yourself and everyone else at that table a disservice by not showing up authentically, bringing your unique perspective, being in service of the collective, but really owning, yeah, I have something unique to bring to this table. I have something unique to bring to this boardroom. I'm not the same as the person to my right or my left or sitting across from me. And that's exactly why I'm here. And so I personally, as someone who has worked in the advertising, marketing, communications industry for 20 years, I've lived an experience of being a minority within the industry, typically one of very few people of color, period, within the agencies that I've worked at, and absolutely one of few Black talents, namely in strategy, and now at the executive level, one of a handful as you look across the industry. And so I think I've learned that my power is in bringing my unique, lived, curated experience to light. And it's a whole journey of growing in that space, not feeling the need to code switch, not feeling the need to edit my references and, try to make my cultural perspective ultra palatable for others. I think there was a time where I was like, man, can I use this reference to something from pop culture that is uniquely Black in a room full of white people? And I think I felt like reservations at time around that. And ultimately, I was just like, no, in the same way that I'm open to learn and be exposed to expressions, examples, references that I don't know. I think I'm very open with bringing new references to the people that I'm encountering within my work. And so I think that was growth for me. And I want to encourage you to lean into your unique lived experience, lean into your defined expertise based on the work that you've done, and have no shame bringing those experiences to bear. And they will be useful because they're real. I think that's the other thing that I've learned. People value someone who's being themselves. I could riff on this one for a long time. I think at some point I probably should do an episode on code switching and really showing up as your authentic self. But like this idea of rising to the occasion, leaning into your authenticity, knowing that you are enough just as you are, and that is why you are at that table is so critical. And the last R in our framework is more of a charge to you, and it is this charge of repeat. I want you to know that imposter syndrome isn't something that just disappears once you get to a certain level, or once you are the CEO, or once you are the head of strategy, or whatever the ambition is in your career. Imposter syndrome can sneak in. It can show up in a multitude of ways. And I think as we are constantly growing and stretching and stepping into new experiences, it can rear its ugly head. And so I want to encourage you to repeat these steps, repeat the process of doing your research, anchoring yourself in readiness, really thinking about how you read the room and understand the players at hand, and then continue to rise to the occasion. These are steps that you can take every time imposter syndrome rears its ugly head. And I hope that these steps have been inspiring for you. I hope they are great reminders. I hope that the alliteration of them makes them easy to remember. And I want to encourage you to not let imposter syndrome steal experience from you. I think sometimes we can talk ourselves out of great experiences because we're wrestling with imposter syndrome. And that's unnecessary. And it's a loss. It's a deep loss. And I think I want you to encourage yourself. I want you to speak good things over yourself and into yourself. Don't let imposter syndrome rob you of the experiences that are for you. Don't let imposter syndrome rob the people around you from receiving everything that you have to offer. So I hope that this has been encouraging. I appreciate you checking out Make the Way. I've been super inspired just seeing new people subscribing and following and listening and commenting and sharing. So continue to tap in. I'm looking forward to meeting you all in some upcoming events and just getting a chance to connect with you one-on-one. Let me know in the comments if you're navigating imposter syndrome, how you've dealt with it in the past. I'd love for you to share your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Make the Way, like, comment, and share it with someone that you think it could be useful for that's navigating imposter syndrome and where this content can help them on their journey. So I appreciate you checking out Make the Way. I'm looking forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Peace.